Hey, you guys, this is Raven. Today, this lesson is called It's a Faith Thang. In case you didn't listen to the last video, I wanted to provide an overview prior to getting into this message. This is a message I hope and pray will lead you through a breakthrough of healing and wellness. For that reason, I do hope you watch the entire video. It could be the very difference. I really tried to make it short, but as you know, I get a little long-winded. And actually, it'll probably be more than one part because I had initially written something, and over a course of time, I kept adding to it, and there's so much I didn't type. This one just kept like flowing. So, anyway, we all know of the woman with the issue of blood, that she had for 12 years, that's mentioned in Matthew 9, verse 18 through 26, Mark 5, 25 through 34, and Luke 8, 43 through 48. Mark revealed she has suffered many things of many physicians, has spent all she had, and had not gotten better, but rather grew worse. This is the same thing that we see today. Before I get into, doing a recap of the last video, I wanted to share a story that hit the news August 1st. There was a secret lab that was discovered in Reedley, California. That's about 25 miles away from Fresno. It's a biotech company was illegally operating a lab in a vacant building. How it came to be discovered, there was a code enforcement officer that had seen a water hose leading to the building, which resulted into the public health department investigating. So the lab is said to be filled with infectious agents, medical waste, and had been storing mice that they said was bioengineered to catch and spread the coronavirus, according to the Fresno County authorities. According to the article, Health and Licensing said that Prestige Biotech, a Chinese medical company registered in Nevada, was operating the unlicensed facility in Reedley, California, which is about 24 southeast of Fresno. The city was not aware they were operating a business there. They didn't have a business license, and they were doing it in the dark, undercover, without anybody noticing it. It also had various chemicals, suspected biological materials, bodily fluids, and hundreds of lab mice. The medical devices found are believed to have been developed on site, such as COVID-19 and pregnancy tests. They also found vessels of liquids, blood, tissue, and other bodily fluid samples and serums, thousands of vials of unlabeled fluids, and suspected biological material. The mice were stored in overcrowded cages with no food or water. According to the article, Associate Prestige Biotech said the mice were genetically engineered to catch and carry the coronavirus. The city seized the mice in April and euthanized 773. Nearly 180 were already dead. They found some viruses to include COVID, HIV, chlamydia, rubella, malaria, and things of that nature. Apparently, the lab had been there since October 2022. The company claims they were making COVID-19 and pregnancy tests with a goal of being a diagnostic lab. According to the article, addresses were provided in court where the addresses that they provided in court were either empty offices or addresses in China that couldn't be verified. So you got a Chinese lab that was found to be illegally operating a lab on U.S. soil, using mice that they said were bioengineered to catch and carry COVID-19. And then there was also HIV, chlamydia, rubella, malaria, and other agents. And that's just one lab. I mean, how many other labs do they have, or some other country even, that's operating on U.S. soil that is doing something like this, that has a lab just in a building that's supposed to be empty? But anyway, the first article that I had seen regarding this said they were bioengineered to catch and spread. And then thereafter, they were saying bioengineered to catch and carry. I noticed not many viewed my video, eat or not, to eat or not to eat. You might want to view that as well. I kind of lightweight discuss bioengineering and genetically modified book in my book. The Bible will be my textbook. And to eat or not to eat, I go in it a little bit more thoroughly. That's the video, I believe, where I mentioned someone had given me some candy, and when I read it, it contained bioengineered food ingredients. That's what was on the label. I didn't plan to eat it. This was from a complete stranger, but I didn't want it to seem like I was going to turn down each thing he offered, so I accepted it. But anyway, it was something, I think it was called Sour Punch, kind of like Sour Patch. It's kind of like a Red Vine or a Twizzler, which I also discovered has bioengineered food ingredients. That too is on the label of those. I discovered that when I was returning the Honey Nut Cheerios, which had bioengineered food ingredients. So I read every pack in the store, and every single brand it had contains bioengineered food ingredients. And then I just, as I mentioned, I had went through the aisle, different ones, just kind of picking up boxes and reading it. And I noticed the same language was on the Ritz crackers, it's on the Pop-Tarts, and it's just on a lot of items. So, when they start, before they start doing things with us, or how they make medical advancements, they start on mice. And so if these mice were bioengineered to catch and carry or catch and spread, I mean, what then when we eat all this bioengineered food ingredients? What effect is it having on us? Are we being bioengineered to catch and spread or catch and carry as well? So if a lab such as the legal one found in Reedley can bioengineer mice to catch and carry, as the first article has said, or catch and spread, we just have to ask ourselves, are we being engineered as well? They're bioengineering, food, fruits and vegetables are genetically modified or engineered. And just think, this Chinese biotech company had been flying under the radar for at least since October of last year. And that's only from what they discovered. They didn't provide legitimate addresses in court. They didn't have a license to operate the business. They were operating in what was supposed to be a vacant business, a vacant building rather. So obviously nothing was being done that was legit or with good intentions. Secondly, I want to share a story before I recap the last video. A couple of months ago, someone I know was around someone who had COVID, and they had not been isolated in the suggested amount of time. And so, long story short, the person I know caught COVID. And so she had taken like 2 tests at home, and they both came up negative. But she ended up going to the hospital because of the way she was feeling, and she tested positive at the hospital. So the doctor that she had seen told her, people who test positive, I'm supposed to give them this, but I'm not going to give it to you. And so she asked the doctor why. And the doctor told her she had looked in her chart and basically she was healthy, so she wasn't going to prescribe it to her. And she told her to keep doing what she was doing. So as time lapsed, she started feeling well, felt like, the COVID had passed. And she went to the doctor again. And this time, a different doctor told her that, I'm sorry, but you still test positive. And he said, I'm supposed to give you this, but I'm not going to. And this doctor also said, I've reviewed your records. And beside this minor thing, you're basically healthy. And if I give you this, you can end up with a boatload of stuff. So it was a blessing that those 2 doctors were honest about the medication they prescribed for COVID. And they had a conscience not to prescribe it to healthy people. Otherwise, it could have caused them to be really sick, and to develop, as he said, a boatload of issues. So you have to ask yourself, when you get COVID and they prescribe you something that they're supposed to give you, what if you are healthy and you don't have a doctor who has a conscience and said, I'm supposed to give you this, but I'm not going to because it can make you really sick. Like you could start developing stuff you didn't have, So just keep that in mind. As we all see commercials on TV, they say consult a doctor if you have a change in vision. A lot of them said that. Have shortness of breath and trouble breathing. And it tells you it can cause liver, kidney, and bladder problems, bleeding, lead to diabetes, and can be fatal. And all symptoms in between, because it's man-made. So now I'll kind of recap the last video where I mentioned when I read Revelations 18:23 and noticed the word sorcery, how I immediately thought of witchcraft and magic and how technology works like magic. You could take a picture now, and if it's blurry, you can make it crystal clear. That's like magic. You can erase a person that shows up in the back if you want to. They have holograms. We used to see stuff like that on Star Trek, and now, it's here. They record conversations that are manufactured and they never took place. AI is actually drawing right now, writing books and papers for people. There are extras on a movie set who have been in the news, as well as actors wondering if studios own their AI doubles. Evidence and data can now be manipulated with technology and so forth. In addition, someone, I think it was yesterday or the day before, they sent me a video, and it was supposed to be of Trump. But I can look at it and tell, like, it looks like him, but it wasn't him and didn't move like him. And there was so much stuff off, like I could tell like it was manufactured. It wasn't actually him talking. And so I told the person who sent it to me, I said, this is not a real video. This is a fake. And she agreed with me. But the person who sent it to her, fell for it. This is what AI is doing. It's actually tricking your eye to think with these videos of certain people that it's them. Like I remember seeing one with LeBron, and AI had created a video of LeBron, and he had this tight pink shirt on with a matching pink skirt, and I think he had a pink purse or clutch or something like that. But at any rate, it looked dead on him. Like I thought that was him, and I was like, "Really, LeBron?" And it was AI generated, but you could not tell. And so this is where we are today with technology, with magic, with sorcery. And Revelations 18:23 states, "For by thy sorceries were all nations deceived." We know Satan is the author of confusion and is creating so much confusion, people can't even trust their eyes right now. So you literally have to have discernment. If you don't have discernment, you need to pray for discernment, because all this stuff they have going on right now with AI and sorcery and magic is really deceiving the eye. Things are looking really real. And so I was saying on the last video how I learned the Greek word for sorcery is pharmakeia. And so that's where we get our English word pharmacy. In addition, I saw an article that said most likely the sorcery of end times Babylon will include drug production and trafficking, substance such as illicit drugs to control and enslave people, making them easier to manipulate. The Greek word pharmakeia describes medication, magic, sorcery, witchcraft, and enchantment. Further, the Greek word pharmakeia appears in Galatians 5:20. The word witchcraft, it appears Revelations 18:23 as sorcery, and the same root word in Revelations 9:21 says sorceries, and then in Revelations 21:8 it says sorcerers, and then in 22:15 it says sorcerers. And these are translated in English as sorcery, witchcraft, and sorcerer. And then they have the Greek word pharmakeu, I believe is pronounced. It says it's administer drugs, drug-related sorcery, the practice of magical arts. Magical spells and potions of magic often involve drugs, a magic spell. My research also showed that the use or the administering of drugs, poisoning, sorcery, magical arts, often found in connection with idolatry. One who prepares or uses magical remedies, magic, healing arts. Again, all nations were deceived by sorcery, pharmacy, witchcraft, magic, spells, and medication. You consider the word sorcery as pharmacy again, and think of all the commercials that we constantly see. I had mentioned before some of them: Trelegy, Shingrix, Dupixent, Humira, Gardasil 9, Xarelto, Stelara, Tempeza, Kisqali, Verzenio, Opdivo, Plexiderm, Paxlovid, Qulipta, Zeposia, Jardiance, Resulti, Ibrance, Entyvio, Skyrizi, Ocrevus, Cabenuva, Rinvoq, Ingrezza, Gentesta, Ozempic, Nordis, Vyepti, Manjaro, Farxiga, Keytruda, Eliquis, Nurtec, Apretude, Arexvy, Kesimpta, It's just a constant push of man-made pills, and all these pills have side effects, because they're not natural. There are so many more that I didn't even mention on here. Like one day I was watching an hour show, and there was literally like 5 drug or vaccine commercials that came on, and about 3 or 4 said, if your vision changes. So a lot of this is affecting your vision. Many of these drugs are for manageable symptoms, but some of the risks are a change in vision, developing cancer or diabetes, experiencing shortness of breath or trouble breathing, bleeding, developing bladder, kidney, or liver problems, and other symptoms that can be fatal. This reminds me of what we learned in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, how the woman had the issue of blood for 12 years, has suffered many things of many physicians, has spent all she had and had not gotten better, but rather grew worse. You notice Mark said of many physicians. So it's not like she was relying on one's word. It's not like she didn't get a second or a third opinion. It says many physicians. She was willing to try whatever they suggested, just to end up broke and worse. We see this today with chemo, with radiation, and other pharmaceuticals. I know someone who had cancer more than once, and some of the treatments she regrets. Some of those treatments can cause cancer, another cancer that you didn't already have. I plan to do a recording with her. I had already talked to her about doing it so you can hear her voice and her passion and her own experience. She knows of someone else that developed a different cancer from a treatment she was receiving. Her husband also ended up with a kidney problem for some of the medications he had been taking. This is, not to bash a form of treatment, but after sharing Revelations 18:23, as we see, the nations were deceived by sorcery, pharmakeia, you have to consider these things. You just can't forsake what the revelations of Jesus Christ said. There are people experiencing this now. Like I knew someone with lupus who transitioned at the age of 31. The medication they gave her, for one thing, it deteriorated her bone. And then she ended up having multiple hip replacements, a problem she didn't start with. Each time, she had a lot of different stuff going on because lupus is a package. Plus she has some other stuff going on. And if I, mention something natural, or I say, hey, why don't you try this for that? Oh, I can't try this because of this. Oh, okay, for that, how come, why not try it like this maybe, or that? Oh, I can't try that because of this. And a lot of the stuff the doctor is giving is prescribing to people. It generally is something they don't recommend, like you use something natural with. It's almost like they want your health on lock, like you to be exclusively working with them and nothing else, because they want to put that man-made stuff in you. I had mentioned in the video also about the fentanyl epidemic in San Francisco, and how Adam Richard ate is enough, how he died as an accidental overdose of fentanyl. We know Robert De Niro's grandson actually died the same way, accidental fentanyl overdose. Then they have that new drug Tranq, which is short for tranquilizer. It's a horse tranquilizer. So I'm wondering, how is the horse tranquilizer getting its way to the street? We went from cocaine to crack to heroin to meth to fentanyl to Oxycontin. So whether from a pharmacy or street pharmacy, there's a great push to medicate us even through our food. There are antibiotics, steroids, and stuff in the beef, pork, and chicken, and even the farm fish. And then you got the fake meat, that they were saying was plant-based, and then come to find out, you know, is genetically engineered, it's modified, and they were putting organisms from meat in some of it. Too much protein can lead to constipation and kidney problems, you know. And I don't know what they call legal drug dealing in your state or in other cities, but in San Francisco, it's referred as open air market in a street level trade. Like the DA's office called it a street level trade. I never realized that it was a trade. It's certainly not a trade you can go to school for, not to my knowledge, you know. But I felt that this is the writing that should follow Beware of the World's Leaven Part 2, in which I discuss, the Greek word. Because now, if you look at it, you're like, okay, a little leery of pharmaceuticals now, so then what do I do? You might not trust big pharm too much or certain medical practices. So naturally, you need to know how to be healed. So different times people have come to me and asked them to pray. They've asked me to pray for them, with different ailments that they have. And I was explaining to them that I felt the source matters. The next thing I'm going to say, I actually could leave out, but I'm going to share it anyway because the title of this is called It's a Faith Thang. So during the COVID mandate, I had to write a letter that explained why I didn't want to take the vaccine. That's the part I could have left out, on this video, but I'm sharing it because some healing to be done requires faith and stepping out on faith and wholeheartedly trusting God. Matthew 13:58 says, and he did not many works there because of their unbelief. Mark 6:5 says, and he could there do no mighty work, save that he laid his hands upon a few sick folk and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief. And he went around about the villages teaching. So what I want you to understand is Jesus only could heal a few sick folk because of their unbelief. So we restrict what Jesus is able to do in our lives, whether healing or otherwise, due to unbelief or lack of faith or your wavering faith. In Mark 9:23-29, Jesus said unto them, if thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believeth. Verse 24, and straightway the father of the child cried out and said with tears, Lord, I believe, help thou mine unbelief. In verse 25, Jesus rebuked the foul spirit, saying unto him, thou dumb and deaf spirit, I charge thee, come out of him and enter no more unto him. Verse 26, and the spirit cried and rent him sore and came out of him. And he was as one dead, insomuch that many said he is dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he rose. And when he was coming to the house, his disciples asked him privately, why could not we cast him out? And he said unto them, this kind can come forth by nothing but prayer and fasting. I want to share something that stood out to me in verse 25 at the time I was typing this on August 11th. Jesus called the spirit what it was, saying, thou dumb and deaf spirit. The reason it stood out to me is because last year I shared with you guys how angry I had allowed myself to get behind something. But what I realized later was anger is not just an emotion, it's a spirit. And it can lead you to places you never have been, and you'll have to find your way out. So anger can literally take over and take on many forms. Like, the Bible said, don't let the sun go down on your anger. I mean, there's things that arise when you keep, like holding on to it. So this is important to understand. You really have to call it out, as Jesus was very specific. Thou deaf and dumb spirit. It was a dumb and deaf spirit. Dumb back then meant you couldn't speak. Not in terms of like how it's used today. Addressing it by name or what it is, as Jesus did, also reminded me of a woman I met a couple of Sundays. Well, it's been like probably 3 or 4 Sundays ago, who has shared quite a bit with me. And she said one of her biggest problems was fear. And she told me she had written a letter to fear. And I said, wow, that's deep, because I completely got it. Because as I said, I realized anger wasn't just an emotion, but a spirit. It literally has life, but it can only do what you allow it to do, unless it just overwhelms you. Like if you just keep entertaining it, it's something that you have to check and address, like Jesus did and like she did, and right into it. By doing so, she literally confronted her demon. She completed, confronted in a letter to fear. Like he said, thou deaf and dumb spirit, she wrote a letter to fear. Another thing, not only did Jesus rebuke it and told it to come out, he told it not to enter anymore, because demons need a host. Just like when they asked Jesus to cast them into pigs. Mark 5:12, and the devils besought him, saying, send us into the swine that we may enter into them. They don't want to go to hell. They want to stick around, so they need a host. So they asked to be cast down into the pigs. So in a Forbes article dated May 24th of this year, it's about a CEO of Google and how he quit, just to warn us that he feels AI is able to comprehend more than we know. He said AI has become sentient. AI has gotten to the point where those harvesting, investing the most, and incorporating into our everyday lives have been meeting with the Senate and asking for government oversight before it takes over. The reason I point that out, like I said, it needs a host. We have the ability to have intelligence, wisdom, discernment by the Spirit of God. So this is an artificial intelligence. So you have to understand where it gets that intelligence from, the source of that. It's just like when, they asked to go into the pigs, but they was unfortunate because those pigs ran violently into the water. In Mark 10:51 and 52, and Luke 18:35 through 42, and Jesus answers and said unto him, what wilt thou that I should do unto thee? The blind man said unto him, Lord, that I might receive my sight. And Jesus said unto him, go thy way, thy faith made thee whole. And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus in the way. Mark 5:15 and Luke 8:35, and also, so Mark 5:15 said, and they come to Jesus, and seeing him that was possessed with the devil and had the legion, sitting and clothed in his right mind, and they were afraid. We know this healing was spiritual and mental, because after the demons was cast out, it says he was in his right mind. Matthew 20:30 through 34, Jesus heals 2 blind men who wanted their eyes to be open. In John 4:50, Jesus heals a man's son because the man believed. In Luke 5:12-15, here there's a man that says was full of leprosy. He tells Jesus, Lord, if thou wilt, thou canst make me clean. So Jesus said, I will, be thou clean. So this man says, if thou wilt, thou can. So he know Jesus can if he wanted to. And so Jesus said, I will, be thou clean. Because this is deals with his faith. Then you go to John 11, verse 25-26. It said, Jesus said unto her, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believest thou this? So there again is going to what you believe, what you have, faith in, the level of faith, because sometimes we can in the flesh waver in faith. Sometimes we can also feel fear or doubt. Matthew 9:28-29. And when he was coming to the house, the blind men came to him, and Jesus said unto them, believe ye that I am able to do this? They said unto him, yea, Lord. Then he touched their eyes, saying, according to your faith, be it unto you. So it's going to be unto them according to their faith. In Matthew 15:28, he says, O woman, great is your faith. Be it done for you as you desired. In Luke 17:19, it says, and he said unto him, arise, go thy way, thy faith hath made thee whole. Matthew 9:22, Mark 5:34, and he said unto her, daughter, thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace and be whole of thy plague. In 1 Kings 14:1-12, Jeroboam's son had fallen sick. After God had blessed him, he made other gods, molten images, to provoke God to anger, and had cast God behind his back, so his son died as a result. We know King David's son didn't make it as a result of David's sin with Bathsheba. In part, I explained the ways and reasons in which I believe people get sick or have illnesses. Sometimes it's from God, sometimes Satan, sometimes your diet and lifestyle, sometimes it's your environment, sometimes it's for God's glory, and sometimes it's for sin. There's also a sin-sick connection and a forgiveness healing connection that I will discuss as well. So if you are sick because of your diet and or lifestyle, that's something that definitely can be changed. If you're sick because your environment, that's also something you have the ability to change. If it requires faith and your faith is unwavering, then that's a faith thing. Other times it may require obedience, like in Naaman's case. Other times it may be confessing of sins, repenting and turning from something. It may require prayer, like Moses had to pray for his sister Miriam when she spoke ill of Moses, God's anointed, and God struck her with leprosy. And you look at 1 Corinthians 16:22 and Psalms 105:15 reads, saying, touch not my anointed and do my prophets no harm. 1 Samuel 24:6 said, and he said unto his men, the Lord forbid that I do this thing unto my master, the Lord's anointed, to stretch forth my hand against him, seeing he is the anointed of the Lord. 1 Samuel 26:9, and David said to Abishai, destroy him not, For who can stretch forth his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? See, people don't realize they stand in danger when they go against God's anointed. I'm surprised more people don't have leprosy, though there's an outbreak in Florida right now. But God deals with people in many different ways when they go against his anointed. And like I said, he struck Miriam with leprosy. It's very important that you understand the source and the methods in which you can be healed, because all these categories matter. If the source of your sickness is environmental, in most cases, many people can change their environment. I know some whose health has improved by moving to Nevada. I know somebody else moved to Colorado and the health has improved because sometimes it's environmental. If the source is due to diet and lifestyle, in most cases, many people can change their diet and lifestyle. You could seek a holistic way, a reputable herbalist or dietitian. You can eat natural foods, veggies, non-GMO, organic, and so forth, because the food of today is not the food of yesterday. On the other hand, if your situation deals with God or Satan, changing your environment and diet won't help. In the Bible, there are several examples of a person or group of people who have been stricken with a plague, pestilence, sickness, or an ailment of some sort. In Exodus 4:1, it says, "And the Lord said unto him," referring to Moses, who had just told God he was slow of speech and not a man of words, "Who hath made man's mouth? Or who maketh the dumb or the deaf or the seeing or the blind? Have not I the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be thy mouth, and teach thee what thou shalt say." So God is saying he has made all man, regardless of what's wrong with the person. He has the ability to do what he will to bring his will to fruition. To touch on this, I remember back in the day at the first church I ever belonged to, and there was a man there with a speech impediment. He stuttered real bad, and he was called to preach. And I was there when he delivered his first sermon, and when he opened his mouth to preach, there was absolutely no stuttering, and we didn't hear him stutter any time thereafter. In Ezekiel 3:26, God said to Ezekiel, "And I will make thy mouth cleave to the roof of thy mouth, that thou shalt be dumb, and shall not be to them a reproof, for they are a rebellious house." So God removed his speech briefly. Recently I heard something said, and also what I just read reminded me of a dream I had many years ago. Though my sight is called "Hear the Ravens Cry," had not existed back then when I had the dream, nor had I added part of Ecclesiastes 10:20, "For a bird of the air shall carry the voice, and that which has wings shall tell the matter." I've always been trying to awake people, warn people, and get people to heed what God is saying. So in this dream, I was yelling or screaming something, trying to get people to heed. And it was like I had lost my voice. Like I could tell I was yelling, but it was like nothing was coming out, or it was muffled. And initially I thought I had lost my voice. It seemed like I had lockjaw or something, like I'm screaming, but it's like I'm not being, it's like nothing was coming out. So anyway, I realized later it wasn't that I couldn't speak, but rather people couldn't hear me. So in other words, they had close their ears. The Bible said to let those that have an ear to hear, hear. Meaning let those who have a desire to hear, hear and understand. We also are told they will have eyes and will not perceive and ears and will not hear. So in Ezekiel 3:26, God made Ezekiel, his prophet, tongue cleave to the roof of his mouth so that he could not speak to the people because they were a rebellious house. In Luke 1:20, Zacharias lost his speech temporarily. This was God. God had sent the angel Gabriel to tell Zachariah that his wife Elizabeth would have a child, referring to John, and he didn't believe the word of God because he was going by what was possible in the natural realm versus in the spiritual realm. So for this reason, Gabriel told Zechariah in verse 20, and behold, thou shalt be dumb and not able to speak until the day that these things shall be performed, because thou believest not my word, which shall be fulfilled in their season. On the other hand, Mary, Elizabeth's cousin, believed. In Luke 1:45, it said, and blessed is she that believed, for there shall be a performance of those things which were told to her from the Lord. We also know that Paul lost his sight for 3 days. That's Acts 9:4-9 and 18. And so this too was God. Miriam was stricken with leprosy. That was God. So now we get down to Job. He was stricken with sore boils from the sole of his foot unto his crown. This was Satan. You can read Job 2, verse 4-7. There's a woman in Luke, I believe chapter 13. It says Satan had her bound. So that was Satan. Then the father who had the son that had been throwing himself in water and fire since he was a child and was possessed, this was Satan. So we see some of this sickness is from God. Paul losing his sight, Miriam stricken with leprosy, Zechariah losing his speech, and there's other examples. And then we see when it comes to Job and his boils, that's Satan. The woman being bound 18 years, that's Satan. And this demon is causing this man's son, since he was a child, to throw himself in water and fire. And 2 Kings 5:1 deals with Naaman. It says, now Naaman, captain of the host of king of Syria, was a great man with his master, and honorable, because by him the Lord had given deliverance unto Syria. And he was also a mighty man in valor, but he was a leper. In verse 8, it says, Elijah asked why the king of Israel had rent his clothes. Then he tells him to bring Naaman to him. And it said, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman comes to Elijah. Elijah tells him to go wash in Jordan 7 times, and his flesh would come again to him, and he would be clean. In verse 11, it said Naaman gets angry. He gets angry because he had a different expectation of how he could be healed. He thought Elijah was going to come out to him, call on the name of the Lord his God, and strike his hand over the place and be recovered. And so Naaman poses the question to Elisha and says, are not Abana and Pharpar rivers of Damascus better than all the waters of Israel? May I not wash in them and be clean? So it says he turned and went away in rage. You can continue reading 2 Kings 5, 13 through 15. And so ultimately, after someone checked Naaman, he decided to go do as he was told, and he was clean. If he had dipped less or more than 7, there wouldn't be a healing. Had he decided to dip in the water Damascus because he felt that water was better in Damascus than all the water of Israel, he wouldn't have been clean. So that took obedience to be healed. In John 9:1-7, Jesus sent a man who had been blind from his birth to a pool for healing. Jesus' disciples asked, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, neither have this man sinned nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. So it was commonly known back in the day, or believed, when someone was sick, it was because they had sinned or their parents had sinned. And that was true to be. But Jesus said in this case, that's not the case. This is for the works of God to be manifested in him. In verse 7, it said, he is told to go wash in the pool of Siloam, which is by interpretation sent. He went his way, therefore, and washed and came seeing. So one had to go wash in Jordan to be clean, and another in Siloam to be clean. So some healing takes obedience and not leading to your own understanding. And by some of these, we see there is a sin-sick connection. John 5:3-16. In verse 5, a man who had infirmity of 38 years, Jesus asked him, wilt thou be made whole? Jesus said to him, rise, take up thy bed, and walk. In verse 14, it said, Jesus finds him in the temple and says, behold, thou art made whole. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come unto thee. So in other words, we see here the sin-sick connection. He had this of 38 years. And once Jesus makes him whole, he lets them know, hey, now that you're whole, sin no more, because if you do, something worse is going to come on you. Okay, so it definitely sounds like his sin was connected to his sickness, or what was going on with him. It said John had been preaching, repent and be baptized. And I look at this man had been like, how he had been for 38 years. And perhaps that he had repented, confessed his sins, he may have been, healed longer, before that. And so we see there's a sin-sick connection. And throughout the Bible, you also see there's a forgiveness healing connection. In Matthew 9:1-8, in Mark 2:5, and Luke 5:19-20, that deals with a man who was paralyzed. He had to be lowered from the rooftop, and he had palsy. So in verse 20 it says, and when he saw their faith, he said unto them, man, thy sins are forgiven thee. In verse 24 it said, but that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power upon earth to forgive sins, he said unto the sick with the palsy, I say unto thee, arise and take up thy couch and go into thine house. So it was a faith thing, and we see the forgiveness and healing connection. So he forgave him first, and then he healed him, So we have to seek out when we're sick or debilitated in some type of way, if we need forgiveness of something, so that we can be healed. In Luke 7:37 through 48, verse 37 tells of a woman who was a sinner who came to where she had heard Jesus was. She had a box of ointment. She wept and washed Jesus' feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair, and she kissed his feet and anointed them with oil. So this shows humility. Jesus said in verse 47, "Wherefore I say unto thee, her sins, which are many, are forgiven. For she loved much, but to whom little is forgiven, the same loveth little." And he said unto her, "Thy sins are forgiven." Jesus tells her, "Thy faith hath saved thee. Go in peace." So we see a forgiveness and salvation were connected to her faith. As I was waiting, on the manifestation of a prayer that I had made, God led me to the book of Habakkuk. And I read 2 verse 3. It said, "For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come and will not tarry." Remember Mark 9:23 through 24. Jesus said unto him, "If thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believeth." And straightway the father of the child cried out and said with tears, "Lord, I believe. Help thou mine unbelief." Maybe this is you. Seek the source of your infirmity, illness, sickness, or whatever it is you need healing with. It could be the very thing that heals you. With each person Jesus healed, he didn't say your sins are forgiven you or go and sin no more. Some he asked if they believed he could heal them. One dealt with a sin issue, another dealt with a faith issue. With Naaman and others, it dealt with being obedient. So the source, if it's from God, it could be for judgment, sin, or his glory. It could be Satan, as in the book of Job with boils, or the demon that caused the man's son to throw himself into water and fire, or Luke 13:11 through 16, where the woman had a spirit of infirmity who Satan had bound for 18 years. I also pointed out in another video, Luke 1 through 5, where that sounds like stem cell research. Stem cell research where, back then someone had mixed the Galilean blood with the sacrificial blood. There's nothing new under the sun. We also know Jesus even rebuked the fever in Peter's mother-in-law. It could be diet and or lifestyle or environment. To heal, this may take confessing, repenting, and turning from that sin that caused it. You may need to fast and pray. You may need to have the elders anoint you with oil and pray. It may be changing a medication, because as I shared the last video with someone, they told me that their doctor had prescribed a medication that leads to diabetes. And so she told the doctor to switch to another one, and she gave him the name because it doesn't lead to diabetes. Go natural, get your herbs, get your veggies, get your fruits in, try to get things in their whole form, because if it's synthetic, man-made food, man-made drugs, there will be side effects, there will be consequences. We know of the woman who had an issue of blood for 12 years before she received her healing. That was a long time. We know of the other man, it took 38 years before he was healed. That's a tremendously long time. I don't know how long you've been sick, but you can be healed, just as the woman who had the issue of blood for 12 years and the other man who had took 38 years before he was healed. In John 20, 30 and 31, it said, and many other signs truly did Jesus in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written that ye might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing ye might have life through his name. Luke 5:17 said the power of the Lord was present to heal. I just want you to know the power still is present. Take it to the Lord in prayer, seek the source, seek healing, and do what is necessary. I hope this has encouraged you, and I pray that you are healed in the name of Jesus. I thank you for tuning in. I also want you to see the YouTube video that I mentioned earlier. If I don't remember to put it in the description, go on YouTube and plug in Faith and Friction, and they'll have 3 videos. And the episode 3 is what I text Minnie earlier. But look at that, because she goes into Revelations 18:23, speaking of pharmakeia, the word sorcery coming from that word, and she gives a little bit more. But at any rate, as I said, seek the source, whether it's coming from God, whether it's coming from Satan, whether it's your environment, whether it's obedience, whether you need to confess sins, whether it's your lifestyle or diet. But anyway, I believe the source matters. And I hope this has been helpful. And as I said, I pray it leads to a healing. God bless, and to God be the glory.